Next thing I want to talk about is color cast. So if we look at this picture right here, it looks like it's pretty well printed. The original artist wants it to be a little bit, but desaturated, but we can bring up some of these colors. So I'm using the eyedropper tool, and if we were to look at something like, say for instance, the background here, it looks kind of white. This background should be completely white, or if we go over to this area, but if we look, it's not completely white. It's actually more of a kind of greenish haze. So what we can do is we can kind of lift up some of that. I'm going to bring in an adjustment layer here, and usually I'd use levels. This is really good. So you can go in and use levels, and you can see if we look at the levels, the histogram here, there aren't any complete whites. The whites kind of stop right here, and there aren't any complete darks or shadows either. So if we want to bring in the highlights a little bit more, we can drag this over. You can see how that kind of brightens the image up. If I bring this in, it also makes the darks richer. So this is a way to kind of give it a little bit more contrast as opposed to what we saw before. This is another way to kind of balance out your photographs if you want to. Once again, it's a choice. You can always go in the opposite direction as well. Let's talk a little bit about doing this with a different adjustment layer, which we haven't talked about before, which is our curves. So if we go into curves, curves are very similar. You have your histogram. I'm just going to bring the properties box out here so we can see everything. So here's your histogram. And then instead of having the 3 items, we just have the lights and darks. So we can drag this over. You can see as I do that, I'm kind of doing the same thing I did before to bring in the highlights and the shadows right to where they're kind of dropped off. But we've got this histogram, and what's really nice about this is, like, let's say that I want my darker shadows to be richer. I can actually click here and bring it down, and instead of it having a really strong kind of cutoff point, you can see it kind of ramps up. I can do the same thing here. I can kind of bring my highlights up a little bit, or if I want to, I can bring them down. Maybe bring that up just a little bit. So we can bring in a lot more detail here. We're still having some strong, rich shadows, but we're just bringing up or lifting up the shadows a little bit more while bringing the highlights down a little bit so we can kind of see a little bit more in the background. You can also see some fringing from the lens that was used in the background here as well. So this is before and after. You can see how we're kind of bringing in a lot more detail by using these curved tools. And if there's a particular place where you really want to lift things up, let's say I really want to brighten up the eyes or something, I can actually use this little thing here, and let's say I want to just bring that area up. If I click and drag up, that's going to find those highlights and drag them up. Same thing here. Click here. You can see I'm getting a new dot right here, and I can kind of bring up that area if I want to. All right, that's using curves. They're really, really strong. It takes a little bit of time to figure them out, but if you're into photography, curves are really where it's at to kind of balance out your shadows and your highlights. In the next section, we're going to talk about something that I think you guys are going to find really fun, but also I want you to be careful and don't make your entire project about that. And that's called the Liquify tool.